Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about the other two characters that I mentioned in the other video earlier today, which if you haven't seen, you should probably go back and watch because it's pretty hype. We're getting Electro, but we're also most likely getting two more characters, and these characters I didn't want to fit into the video yesterday or earlier today with Electro because they're completely different and because it has some reference, some higher connection to the actual movie Far From Home, and it also doesn't come as a sneak peek. It's not coming from Netmarble, it's coming from Marvel. Now, generally speaking, Marvel doesn't always post these sort of articles before an MCU movie, but they have been doing it more recently in the past like 6 months to a year, and so we have seen this quite a few times. We saw this for Endgame, we saw this for Infinity War, and a couple of others as well, I believe Captain Marvel. And so this one is all about Spider-Man, it's all about Spider-Man Far From Home, and so just like that video that we saw, you know, in the last video or the one before that, where we saw all the different video games, you know, Puzzle Quest, Contest of Champions, Strike Force, Battle Lines, it's the same thing except it's text rather than a video, and the video is here but now they also have the text, and the text is different than the video. So they don't talk about Mysterio. Well, they do talk about Mysterio, but they don't talk about a legendary battle. Instead, they say that we're getting two new suits, which I presume are uniforms for Spider-Man. We get the hybrid suit, which is the black and red, and then the stealth suit, which we've seen from the trailers and the sneak peeks, and then Mysterio's getting a movie suit. So that's all well and good, no confirmation of a tier 3 or anything. Additionally, and this is the part that we had no idea about until this article was posted yesterday, the hit mobile game will be seeing the debut of Hydra Man and Molten Man. So this is a pretty interesting development. Now, for those of you that don't know who Hydra Man and Molten Man are, I'm going to do a really quick Google search here while I have this tab open, and we're going to go Spider-Man Far From Home. And so if you haven't seen any of the trailers, or if you're avoiding them, you probably want to look away right now. But essentially, the main villain, or the character that we think is a villain in Far From Home, Mysterio, appears to be a hero. And he appears to be a hero because he appears to be fighting these things called elementals. And so this is what we're talking about when we're talking about Molten Man and Hydra Man. Well, that's what we're talking about now in Marvel Future Fight. That's not necessarily what's going to happen in Far From Home. There's a ton of speculation going on, and fans still don't have any idea, and I imagine we won't know until the actual movie is out and we see it. But there's basically three things that this could be. They could be elementals, they could be Hydra Man, Molten Man, and Sandman, or they could just be regular. There's actually four. They could just be regular monsters that don't have a name, that don't have a specific power, that don't have, you know, their own sort of tie-in, or they could be illusions created by Mysterio. Mysterio loves to create illusions. He loves to create practical effects like robotics and stuff like that in order to create a problem that he can solve to make himself the hero. That's kind of the classic Mysterio trope. But fans don't know. The only clue that fans have had thus far, I mean, I haven't been keeping up with the really recent stuff, so there may be new leaks or new fan theories. Apparently there's also spoilers for the movie, but I'm avoiding those and I'm not mentioning them. But the one thing that fans were able to catch from the trailer specifically is a nod to Hydra Man. And it's in one of the first trailers, and it's a scene here where this girl's taking a picture of Ned, and on the boat it says ASM 212. So if you translate that into nerd speak, that's Amazing Spider-Man issue 212, and that is actually the issue that debuted Hydra Man in, I believe, the I'm looking it up here, the 1980s. So in 1981, Amazing Spider-Man 212 is when Hydra Man Morris Bench was introduced. And that is a nod to the character. Now, does that mean that we're not getting Hydra Man and Molten Man and Sandman in the movie? I have no idea, but it doesn't really matter because we're getting them in Marvel Future Fight. So, I mean, there's always a small possibility that something got lost in translation and something here doesn't necessarily match what we're going to be getting in game, but I highly doubt that Marvel themselves would publish something that they haven't already agreed to with Netmarble as a company developing this game. So this is pretty much a guarantee at this point. We're going to be getting at least minimum 3 new characters, 3 new villains. I'm talking Hydra Man, Molten Man, and then we've already covered Electro, and then uniforms, 3 new uniforms, 1 for Mysterio, 2 for Spider-Man. Now, as far as Hydra Man and Molten Man goes, what can we expect from those characters? Well, I mentioned in the video earlier today that I probably think Electro is going to be a speed type, and there was an extra reason why. Despite the fact that Electro is basically an elemental. In the sense that, you know, all of his power derives from an element, and, you know, he almost looks like a living element, and it courses through his body, and it exudes off of his skin, like Human Torch, like Iceman, etc. The reason why I think that Electro's going to be speed is because I really think that Hydra Man and Molten Man are probably going to be Blast, and so that's another update with more Blast characters coming in. Now, it's very possible as well, despite the fact that I think they're going to be Blast, because let's be honest, Human Torch and Molten Man are pretty much the same. I didn't really know much about Molten Man before today, so to be honest with you guys, I did have to go and look him up. But he's basically like the evil version of Human Torch. There's only one difference. Human Torch can turn off his flames and look like a regular human. Apparently, Molten Man, from what I've read, cannot. And he also has metallic skin rather than having human skin. So it's a bit of a difference there. He's not exactly the same as Human Torch, but he's very, very close to Human Torch. And, you know, if you're just a super casual fan and you confuse the two, don't feel bad, because they look pretty identical when they're in their flaming form. Hydra Man, on the other hand, would look like Iceman if you aimed a blow dryer at him for a long time, and he basically just has the properties of Iceman except water. He has water manipulation, he can turn into water, he can change his body shape depending on the water, so he can get really big, he can get really small, he can kind of sneak around and stuff. But I do look forward to seeing both of these characters in the game, because I think they have really unique skill sets, and they'll have very cool animations. But the good news is, on top of, you know, the obvious logical conclusion of saying they're going to be Blast types, we can look at Sandman. And so, despite the fact that he's an elemental type character, you know, he derives his powers from an element, earth, sand. He's a combat type. Jesus, I was stuttering. He's a combat type. So there's definitely a possibility that Molten Man and Hydra Man could both be combat types. I would definitely welcome this as a change. I would also like to see these two combat types have energy attack rather than physical attack. I think it'd be quite cool. Also, just touching on their powers just a little bit, Hydra Man, because he's made of water, you can imagine that it's very difficult to actually hurt him. And there's actually quite a few issues where Spider-Man has difficulty kind of pinning him down, because you can't really, I mean, you can punch water, but it doesn't have the same sort of, you know, power as punching an actual face with skin and bone and flesh behind it. And Hydra Man uses that to his advantage, so it would be really cool, like Sandman, to see a character who has physical damage immunity, either persistent physical damage immunity or something like Bishop, where his leadership includes a very high physical defense stat, and then he also has a physical defense stat, or physical defense or physical damage received reduced by, which is basically a physical defense stat, by a percentage. And he could be a pretty cool counter to some of the stronger physical type characters that we have, possibly dueling with Wolverine and Deadpool and those types of characters. The game is pretty dominated right now by energy damage characters, so I don't really see Hydra Man or Molten Man doing too much against them, because it's totally different energy versus physical damage against someone who's made of water, or someone who's made of fire in this case, and metal. But we'll have to wait and see, and I'm actually pretty excited for them. I think the typing issue, I don't know, in my mind, the more that I talk about it, the more that it seems to be an issue. But perhaps I'm just exaggerating it because I talk about this every day, but I actually do want to pass that question on to you guys. Looking at the numbers, I mean, they don't have to be equal. We don't have to have, you know, a 50-50 split as we gear towards, as we lean towards 200 characters in the game. We're going to go up to at least 194 with this update. But yeah, I pass that question on to you guys. Is there enough of an imbalance right now that it needs to be looked at between the four different classes? Do you think that we should introduce more variety into the classes, or do you think that it would kind of ruin the game at this point when we're 4 years deep? Do we have to stick with Combat Blast Speed Universal? There's so much contradiction already within each of the classes. You know, you would think, okay, all elementals should be one type. Well, they're absolutely not all one type. They're spread around multiple different zones in the game in terms of their class, and you've got some that are universal, you've got some that are blast, and you've got some that are combat. Speed is basically the only one that doesn't have a pure elemental based character, but you've got ghosts, you've got poison types, and you've got pretty much everything else in between. And then that even extends to characters like Wolverine versus X-23. Why is one combat and one blast? Punisher versus Gamora versus Nebula versus all these other characters. Why is Falcon and Domino speed, but then Punisher's combat? And then you have other characters. Why are they blast when they could? Why is Rocket blast? Shouldn't he be combat, or shouldn't he be a speed type, or even War Machine, or even someone else, you know, further down the list? If you just keep looking at these, and basically you could shuffle them all around. And I don't know, is that the point or not? So let me know what you guys think of the typing situation that we have in the game. Is it an issue or is it a non-issue? How would you change it if you did want to change it? And then what do you think of Hydra Man and Molten Man? I personally like it when Marvel Future Fight introduces quirkier, lesser-known characters, because that's kind of part of the fun and part of the charm of Marvel Future Fight. It has such an expansive roster, and the majority of the game is based on character building. And while I have made fun of the game in the past for the kind of Barbie fixation thing, it seems as though Marvel Future Fight and Netmarble are dedicated to improving existing game modes with their recent survey on Giant Boss Raid and then shutting down of Alliance Raid. So they don't want this to just be a Barbie simulator. And so I welcome these more fringe characters, especially when they're villains, because it's going to bring more people to the game, and it's going to give people more opportunities to play with different types of characters. And I can't wait to see, personally, if Hydra Man is going to deal cold damage or not. That's the last question I want to leave you guys with, because I immediately thought of it. Iceman is ice, which is literally frozen water, and he deals chill damage with all of his skills. Is Hydra Man going to deal chill damage with all of his skills? What do you think? How many elemental obelisks have you started rolling? I have a poison damage one here myself, but I'm pretty much screwed for fire and cold. Let me know if you're in trouble like me or not. Well, trouble. I still have a lot of CTPs. I know. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.